Welcome to the Communication Diva podcast, episode 58. Today's podcast is on the subject of relationship. Relationship, the foundation of all communication, and soap operas.
Welcome to Communication Diva. I'm your host, Jenn Swanson, and here at Communication Diva, the aim is to help you think about communication in an intentional way. So you know that most conflict occurs due to poor communication, or what we might call communication breakdown. And I think that if we could improve our communication skills, if all of us could improve our communication skills, we would deepen our relationships with others. And I think we would find that life goes just a little bit smoother if that were to happen. Now, last episode, I promised I'd tell you a little bit about the time spent in Illinois at a couple of workshops with author, speaker, and teacher, Father Richard Rohr. Now, I want to say that I know that you as a listener may not be a person of faith, and this is in no means meant to scare you off or convert you to anything. I had a significant week, and I thought I would share a little bit about it before we get into the topic of today, which is relationship. So let me just tell you a little bit about Richard. Richard Rohr is a Franciscan priest and is a quite sought-after guest lecturer. He's traveled the globe teaching people. He's written I'd say at least a dozen, probably more books. He seems to write books constantly. There's always a new one coming out. And because he's almost 70, he's decided to stop all touring about the globe and to concentrate on teaching from his workplace, which is the Center for Action and Contemplation in Albuquerque, New Mexico, where he lives. And he's beginning a brand new 2-year school program called the Living School there, which sounds just fantastic. It's absolutely sold out, but it sounds fantastic. So he's not stopping what he's doing, but he's stopping the traipsing about all over the countryside and to various countries around the world. And he tells a very funny story that, he's sticking to this retirement plan unless, of course, the Dalai Lama comes calling. Well, guess what? The Dalai Lama did come calling recently, and it sounds like next spring Richard will be going off to Louisville, Kentucky to attend a symposium with the Dalai Lama and many other spiritual teachers and leaders from around the globe. So he's a very popular and sought-after person. Now, Louisville, Kentucky has decided to call themselves the City of Compassion, and it sounds like even the public servants and the police department, everybody's getting in on this. And so it sounds like it's going to be a wonderful thing. I believe it's sometime in May. But if you're anywhere near there or you can get to it, it might be just a wonderful celebration. And what a cool idea to have a whole city call themselves the City of Compassion. I just, whether you're practicing a religious faith or not, or just feel like a compassionate person, I think that's just a fantastic project to get on board with. So that was cool to hear about. Now, our time with Richard was spent learning about his work with the 12-step programs created by Bill Wilson, who invented Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, etc., and spirituality. And Richard Rohr's book, Breathing Underwater, is one that I have recommended to many people so far, and especially for anyone who has been really turned off from organized religion. And there's very good reason for that. There's an awful lot of crappy theology out there and terrible situations. And I totally understand why people have been pretty much burned in many cases by by religion. So this actually gave me a lot of hope. Richard spoke on Valentine's Day of divine intimacy, which seemed very appropriate. He talked about relationships between humans and a higher power, whether you want to call that God or some other name. And he talked about how science and religion are coming together with quantum physics and things that the scientists are discovering about all sorts of things, mirror neurons. And anyway, there was just so much that he talked about. And as far as relationships go, how loving each other can be a hard thing to do. It was an absolutely fabulous week, and I really can't do any of his teaching justice here in this short time. But I will link to the website at the Center for Action and Contemplation so that you can check out Richard Rohr's work further if you're so inclined. And I can just finish by saying that the teachings of this person have had a huge impact, a huge influence on my faith and my work. And it was such an incredible gift to be able to meet him personally. I've put a picture of Richard and Scott and I on the website. You can see that at www.CommunicationDiva.com. And it was pretty exciting to meet somebody who's such a high profile and person, and such a beautiful person. And it was, he's a regular man. He's very humble, and even though we were joking that he's got sort of rock star quality among the some of us theological types. He's a regular guy, and it was just lovely to get to know that. All right, so on to the topic for today: relationship. And I really believe that relationship is the basis for just about everything. And that if you have communication troubles, it may be that there are also relationship troubles. And I'm not just talking about intimate relations here. I'm talking about relationships with your children, with your extended family, with your friends, with your colleagues at work, your clients, or your customers in a business setting. We form relationships all over the place, and the care and attention we give to those can mean the world of difference as to the quality of the communication we have and the quality of the relationships themselves. One of the things I was thinking about when mulling over this topic in my head was that we form relationships with shopkeepers and people that work in different stores and that. I'm sure that you may have had this experience too, that you would rather go to a particular store because there's a nice person working there. I know lots of people who get to know their baristas at the coffee shops. We live in the Pacific Northwest, where coffee is everywhere. And, there are people walking down the street with coffee mugs in hand at all times of the day and the night, and coffee shops on every corner. And people have their little favorite shops that they go into. And sometimes the people behind the counter know their order before they even get up there. And that's a relationship. It's a business relationship, but it is one where people feel comfortable. They have some rapport with one another. And so they will sometimes make the effort to go to one of those places where they are known rather than to somewhere where nobody knows who they are. I would far rather shop at a little local privately owned store than I would at one of the big box impersonal stores. And even to the point where it means that sometimes I have to pay more. We have tried the You Brew winemaking venture, where you go to a shop and you purchase the juice, I guess, and then you put labels on bottles, and you sort of make the wine. You choose the juice. You mix some things together, and then you leave the product there. And then several weeks later, when it's fermented and ready to bottle, you come back and you put it into bottles, and you put the corks in, and you put the little covers on top. And there is a winemaking shop that is, a good 45 minutes to an hour drive from where we live. But because we were treated just about like family when we walked into this little family-owned business, and we had a nice chat with the owners, and they answered all sorts of questions, and they were nice to the girls that were with us, the kids, and all of that, I think we're going to go back there. I mean, we don't make wine very often, but when we do, I think that's the place we're going to go. Even though there are places much closer to where we live, But we've now established some kind of a relationship with this company and these people, and so we would go back there. So I think it is a key thing, relationship in many different areas. I have several stories to tell you about relationships that could have worked better. I'll just tell you a couple of other things before I get to that. What about relationships with children, in your life? The children that you have, or the children that are in your family, nieces, nephews, cousins, neighborhood children. I know a woman at my church who has the Indo-Canadian children next door. She's a Caucasian woman, born and raised in our area, and she has the Indo-Canadian children of immigrants from India over to her house to teach them how to bake. And they wanted to know how to bake, and so she doesn't have any children, and so she has these kids over on rainy afternoons, sometimes on Sundays, and they have a wonderful time learning how to make cookies and other kinds of Canadian treats with this woman. So she's built a relationship with her neighbors, which is quite wonderful. And when my children were little, I would rather have a messy house and sit down and play with the kids than missing out on having some of that fun. Now, of course, you have to clean the house at some point, but I let some things go, because the relationship with kids, sitting down and playing tea party or dress up or whatever it was much more important, I think, than whether or not the floor was washed or the laundry was, folded properly and all that stuff. So I think it's just such an important part of our life, and sometimes it is part that gets neglected. Now, I want to talk about friends here, your friends and your friendships and your relationships that you have. And relationships, hopefully with friends, are ones that you want to be having. Now, some friendships have been long-term. You've had this friend forever, and maybe you've grown apart and you don't have things in common anymore. But sometimes you have friends that are not really fun to be around. And those relationships can be life-draining instead of life-giving. And you have to stop and think at some point, why am I continuing to have a relationship with this person? What is it about this person? Why do I feel obligated? Why do I need to? You're not related to them. So if these are just friends, and they're not friends that, are feeding your soul in some way, then what the heck is the point? And it might be time to do a little evaluation of the friendships that you have and think, well, is this really taking so much time away from other people I'd like to be having relationships with? From my family, from my other friends. It's something to consider. I have a friend who fired all her friends. I thought it was actually a very courageous move. She realized after some time that this group of women that were coming over after work, that lived in her complex, were coming over. They'd walk into the house, they'd take drinks and food out of her refrigerator, and they really were there for the purpose of hanging out with her husband, who happens to be a very nice-looking man. And after a while, she realized it didn't matter if she was there or not. They really weren't coming to see her. And she really got upset by this. And one day they came to the door and went to open it to come in, and the door was locked. So they thought this was mysterious. So they rang the doorbell. And she opened the door, and there were 3 or 4 of them standing there. And she says, "You can't come in anymore." She says, "I realized that you're not really my friend. You're coming in here, you're drinking my pop, and you're eating my food. And the only reason you're coming over is that you want to hang out and look at my husband." And she said, "So I don't need this. So you're fired." Now, I would never probably have the courage to do something like that, but she's got an aggressive personality, and she actually was calling it like it was. and the women were not very happy with her, but they didn't make any apologies either, and that was the end of that. And she made more friends, and her husband couldn't care less. He was kind of clueless as to what was going on, or at least he says. And life carried on, and they found different people to hang out with. But I always tell that story of my very dear friend and her episode in firing friends that weren't actually her friends. So that's something to think about. What are the qualities of your relationships? Relationships they have a bit of a climate to them, I think. They are, some of them are smooth sailing. They're calm. They tick along beautifully, whatever metaphor you want to use there. And others are stormy and rocky and volatile, and you're fighting and blowing up. And you have to wonder, if you don't have to be in relationship with this person, if you're not related to them or married to them, then what the heck's going on, right? So there's something for you to think about. I told you I'd tell a couple of stories. That was one of them, but here are a couple of more. I used to work for many years in the hospital, and I worked in all different departments in the hospital. And one of the and I may have told this story before, I'm not sure, but one of the units I worked in was the intensive care unit, and there was a specialist, a doctor, that came in, and he was very formal. And he was very, very smart, but he really, really did not understand the importance of creating relationship with the nursing staff. So he would fly in, because he was a busy guy, and he would come over to these very sick patients, and he would bark things to the nurse, like asking for blood work results and asking for x-ray results and asking for, information. And he would do that without even saying, "Good morning, how are you?" or "How's your day going?" to the nurse that he was asking these questions of. And it was very quickly that people started to talk about him behind his back. Very quickly that people would get flustered before he came in because they were worried he was going to ask them questions they couldn't answer. Very quickly that people started to not like this doctor. And I remember thinking, well, there's something wrong here. And I decided to ask him, just to ask him a question. We were working at the desk, and he was sitting there writing quietly. And I turned to him and I said, "Hey, Doc, do you have children?" And he wouldn't believe, his whole face lit up, and he got this big smile on his face, and he told me he had small children, 4 and 2 or something. And I was trying to picture this very, official person whose complete demeanor changed when I asked him about his kids. And, it wasn't too long before we were exchanging recipes and things. Like, this was a nice person underneath, but he just didn't have a clue as to how to develop a little bit of a relationship with the people that he worked with. And therefore, things were not going smoothly. I remember being at a party. It was a farewell party or a retirement party for one of the nurses, and he came running over with a glass of wine to a group that we were standing in, and he was all chatty and friendly, and the other people didn't quite know what to do. They kind of got all stiff and quiet and moved away because they'd never seen a relational side of this person before. They'd only seen all business. And so, it was kind of sad. I really, really wanted to take him and sit him down and say, "Do you know what's going on here?" But, really not my place to do that. But I hope for his sake that he's figured it out by now, that, and it doesn't matter how smart you are. Communications are a challenge for everybody. It doesn't matter how many degrees you have or what letters you have in front of or behind your name. Some people are just really good at communicating, and some people, it takes a lot of work. And that was one of the stories. Another story to tell you and to talk about relationships is it's really hard. One of the sort of quotes that I've seen is, "You can't teach the task if the relationship is suffering." And I think that's really true. I was asked to retrain a whole bunch of clerks at a psychiatric institute once. The college that I worked at had asked me. I was junior person on the totem pole in the seniority, and so I had to go out and retrain 30 people, and teach them medical terminology and how to process medication orders, and anyway, do all of these things to help them become unit clerks, which was the title they were actually had been working under anyways, but they were doing things like answering telephones and doing payroll and doing staffing and all reception kind of duties, but they were never touching patient charts, and they weren't doing any of the medical end of things. And their organization had said, if you don't learn how to do all of this by next April, this was in the September, you'll all lose your jobs. Well, this was a terrible situation because some of these people were a year to retirement. Some of these people never wanted to be nursing unit clerks or to work in that field at all. They had come from a different union, and they were basically working in the forensics unit, which was like a jail more than anything else. And the other thing that this institution didn't want to do was train them enough that they would receive a piece of paper out of it. So they were giving them almost the whole program and not quite all of the program. It was a terrible situation. And I had to walk into 2 classrooms. I had one class in the morning while the others covered everybody else's nursing stations. And I had the second group in the afternoon while the first group ran around working for everybody else. And everybody was stressed and everybody was mad, and nobody knew who I was. And I walked in, and I was walking into, the body language was just so evident, and the resentment was palpable. A lot of people crossed arms, glaring, and I'm supposed to teach these people, really technical stuff. So that was one of the hardest communication challenges I ever had, and I spent the first few days with these people just listening and acknowledging the fact that I thought they were also being placed in a terrible position, and that I completely understood why they would be furious, and I would be too. And I listened to them rant and rave and rail and get mad, and then after they'd seemed to have gotten that out of their system after a few days, I said, you know what, we're in this together, and our hands are kind of tied. Why don't we get down to some work? And at that point, we'd had a little bit of relationship building going on. They still didn't like the circumstance, but I think they were starting to like me, and I was liking them, and it was, the relationship was forming. So in the end, most of them came through the program. Some of them left. They just couldn't reconcile with it, but some of them stayed, and we managed to convince the college that they should provide some way for the people that wanted to continue on and get a piece of paper to do so. So anyway, it worked out in the end, but I certainly was not going to walk in that first day and start teaching them, anatomy and physiology and pharmacology and stuff, because there's no way. They were just, it was impossible. It was like talking to brick walls. So relationship, again, is just so important. And we're talking about all different relationships, and I haven't talked about your partner yet, your intimate relationships. And I think there's a lot of stuff out there on relationship advice, and I'm not really going to get into all of that in this episode. But one of the things I wanted to talk about was time spent working on your relationship, because relationships do need care and watering and fertilizing, just like any plant. And that's time and attention and nurturing. And if that's not happening because life is too busy, because you have many other commitments, it won't be surprising to see that relationship kind of wilt and look sickly and not be as healthy and strong and growing as it could be. So think about the relationships that are key to you in your life, and what have you done lately to nurture those relationships? Who are the people in your life that you really haven't had a lot of time to spend with but really would like to? What relationships have you not taken care of lately? And who have you made to feel special today? There's a question to leave you with. So, thinking about relationships, and the purpose again today is just to talk about that and to have you ponder and think a little bit about who in your world that you have a relationship with could you reach out to, and could you deepen that relationship in some way? So there you have it. There's my little blurb on relationship and the things that I was thinking about. And relationship, if you are a person of faith, your relationship also with God or your higher power. What about that too? Have you had time to devote any time to that relationship? Through meditation or prayer or whatever way works for you. Yes, so I hope that that you have gotten something of value out of this episode. Thank you very much for taking the time out of your busy day to listen to me blab on and on here. I really appreciate you. I really appreciate the emails that I get, and the Facebook notes, and the Twitter notes, and the people that have reached out to say hello. I think that's just wonderful. So I strongly recommend relationship and encourage feedback and conversation as well. So thank you very much. I will have all sorts of links to the things I was talking about as far as Richard Rohr goes on the website at www.communicationdiva.com. I thought that I had the SpeakPipe voicemail thing all sorted out, and for some reason I have been told that my HTML something is broken. So anyways, I'm not entirely sure what they're talking about, but the voicemail function is not functioning right now, and so if you were wondering where it was after the last episode, there seems to be a problem with it. So I'm going to work on that next, try and fix that. I also wanted to let you know that sometime, hopefully in the next couple of months, I will be offering an audio product. It will be an audio series on public speaking and presentation making. So I'm working away on that slowly at the moment. So I'll let you know closer to the time when that's going to be published. Anyway, take good care. Take care of those in your world that you love. And until next time, I'm Jenn Swanson with Communication Diva.